Hi everyone, it's Jessica Feinberg. I'm an artist and illustrator from Tucson, Arizona. I'm also an author and a small business owner, so I'm pretty used to being stuck at home. I know a lot of other people aren't, so I've started doing a lot of Twitch streaming, and today I thought I would work on this little guy. He is all sketched out in pencil, and I'm going to give you guys a bit of an inking demo. He's a Strawberry Kiwi Dragon, so he loves strawberries and kiwis. So we're going to be doing a lot of reds, greens, and maybe some blues on him, and he has kind of a butterfly style to his wings when I get to color. But today, to begin with, we're going to start out inking, and I'll real quick go through my inking tools again. I use mainly Sharpie pens because they're waterproof, really good quality. They're affordable. I go through a lot of pens every month because I ink a ton of pictures for coloring books and my books. So these are awesome. I've got my drawing pencil and eraser here, and I usually have a thicker Sharpie. Let me grab that. So this one is an Amazon Basics permanent marker, but just a regular Sharpie will do. I'm drawing on Canson XL watercolor paper uh, because I'm planning to add a watercolor afterwards. I'll be scanning it in between so I can have a black and white copy for my coloring books. And I thought it'd be cool to kind of be doing a really cute dragon and show you guys a lot of the details. So I'm going to zoom in kind of on the face so I can work on that and you can really see what's going on. Oh, and my other equipment here, because it's important to stay hydrated and have water, and also my important organic mini gummy bears, because these are awesome and you got to keep your energy up while you're drawing. Okay, so I got it all zoomed up on the face, and I'm just going to start inking there. And if anyone stops in and has questions, wants to chat about drawing, life, the universe, I'll just be hanging out here inking for a while. Company is more than welcome. So when I'm inking, obviously I have a pencil drawing, and what I'm doing is I'm just tracing over those lines. I don't have to be super exact, I can make changes, but I'm basically trying to transfer my rough pencil drawing into a more finished ink drawing. And I start out by just doing a very simple line that's the width of the pen. And you can get smaller pens than this. I'm also a fan of waterproof gel pens, but Pilot only makes them in Japan and Korea, so you have to kind of spend some more on those, but they do come in much finer sizes. And you can also ink using waterproof bottle of ink and a brush, should you so desire. But I find this is kind of the fastest way to translate something into ink without getting out a ton of supplies or making a huge mess. It's very portable. So I don't worry about giving my lines a lot of style at this point. I'm just kind of tracing them in here. And you can see already he's going to be really cute. As I said before, he's a Strawberry Kiwi Dragon. It's because my next field guide book is designed to pair with the one I did called Dessert Dragons, but this one is Beverage Beasts. So this dragon loves strawberry and kiwi juice and any related beverages, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, though I think something bad might happen if they drink too much of the ones with alcohol in them. And one of the things I do when I design a dragon with butterfly wings, and I sketch these in really quick because I've done a lot of butterfly wings, is sometimes mirror that design by giving them butterfly wing style ears. That sounds kind of weird, but it looks really cool once they're kind of inked in here. So whatever pattern I kind of do up here, I'm going to mirror a bit in the wings down here. I love regular gel pens. The problem is they're not waterproof. So you can use them on top of paint, but they get... I love strawberries too. Lily's in our chat and she's saying she loves strawberries. But yeah, the problem is they get if you use them before adding watercolors, and they can get all smudged. And I thought it was really cool that they actually make waterproof ones. They just don't make them in the US. They're called high-tech C pens, and you can buy them on Amazon. They're just sometimes kind of pricey, though they do make ones that are kind of like they look kind of like mechanical pencils, but they actually take 3 cartridges, and they take 3 different colors of ink, and you can buy the cartridges a bit cheaper. The problem I have is also because they're such fine pens, like they go, if you've ever used the finest size of micron, they go smaller than that. So you can get the craziest details in ink with them. But I find that especially in Arizona, they tend to dry out pretty easily, even with the caps on. It's harder to kind of get them restarted. And they don't seem to have as much ink in them. I don't know. I ink a lot. So, and I don't know if I press hard when I ink. I don't think I press that hard, but I tend to wear out the tips on more fine art pens. So, and this thing with the circle scales is something I've started doing recently, and it looks a little weird with just like the thin lines I'm putting in. But once you kind of thicken your ink, you can do some really cool things with the style. And a lot of people ask me about how you get a style when you ink, and I think the answer is you just ink. I mean, you can look at other artists and try to figure out how they did things, and comic books and comic book tutorial books like how to ink for comic books have a lot of tips in them, but I've found a lot of it is just practice and developing kind of what you like. He's going to have these huge, awesome butterfly wings here. And I've also done a lot of butterfly wings before, so I can kind of just make this up as I go along. When I first started doing butterfly wings, I was using like tons of reference, but I like putting them on stuff I'm doing for coloring books because I think they're really fun for people to color. Jonah Vasquez is awesome. Yeah, his inking style is cool. So I had this one useful thing that I always recommend in inking, and I know the super fancy name for it and the story behind it, which is really funny because I took botanical illustration classes, so we got to learn that. Which is that I'll see if I can. I make sure my ink is like dried a little bit before I erase it, but this should be good up here. See if I can demonstrate this. So one of the ways to make drawings look more 3D, and a lot of us do this, but we don't know what the technique is called, is where you have 2 lines that meet like right here, kind of in his butterfly ear area. If I make just that triangle where they meet, if I fill that in so that it has this little bit of thickness there, and you can kind of do that in a bunch of places, it adds a dimension to it. And that's one way to kind of get away from like these boring sort of single thickness lines. Hi, Dragon Soul. So this technique actually has a really bizarre name that I had done this for years, and I didn't know it had a name, and I didn't know where the name came from until I did a workshop where we were learning to draw plants in ink. This technique is called snodgrassing, which is one of the weirdest names you will ever hear related to inking techniques. And it is called that because there was an artist who became, I think, rather famous for doing botanical plant illustrations in ink. And he developed this technique and taught it to others. And his last name was Snodgrass. I am not making this up. It's the weirdest thing. But it's a really cool way to make things look three-dimensional. And I just thicken some lines. I don't thicken all my lines. Like I won't thicken the lines inside his eye. I'll just kind of thicken around them. And then I'll tend to thicken any place that my lines join together. And eventually that creates a pretty cool stylized piece. And for where I do these circles, what I do is I kind of apply the same technique. I create these thicker borders between them. And I sometimes overlap them a little. I might add like another one in there. And they start to kind of take on a bit of fun personality. And it's really fun, I think, when you have the coloring book. It can be called drop shadowing, but drop shadowing is usually when you're actually drawing a shadow under something, which I guess sometimes can look the same. This is used even in two-dimensional drawing, it's all two-dimensional drawing, but drawings that aren't supposed to look three-dimensional. It's kind of, I've always heard it compared to where you see stained glass windows, because the way they do stained glass, when they join the lines, they have to kind of put a bead of, I think it's lead I don't know if that's still what's used for stained glass, but originally was lead. And that sort of is that same style. It's just a way of thickening where the corners of things meet. And I tend to kind of thicken everything, but I try to give it some expression. And I find that's easier than trying to do something with all thin lines because chances are your tracing won't be perfect of your pencil drawing. There'll be things you want to adjust, and this is a great way to do it. For this part, I'm just going to draw some lines in here since he's going to have sort of butterfly wing ears, which is a little weird, but I think it'd be a really cool thing if dragons had these because they would kind of flap. It should be really neat looking. But yeah, everybody thinks inking is really complicated, and I have I can't remember what it's called, but there's a huge book they always recommend you get for traditional fine art inking. It's just got pages and pages of examples on like ink patterns for brick walls and all sorts of things like that. And then I have a couple of different comic book ones that show some great things for like comic book water and textures and stuff like that. That definitely helped me out. But for the most part, I think just a few things like playing with the thickness of your lines and then sometimes putting shadows in. I tend to use hatching like this to just where like it's going to be under his ear here to create a little depth. I don't tend to do too much shading like that for coloring book pieces. Yeah, I think they'd be like a little transparent and really cool, like fluttery. Um, and I love that too. I love seeing how many people draw dragons differently. There are a few cases where, okay, there's really only two things that drive me crazy when I see a dragon that I feel like is drawn incorrectly. And to be fair, as they say, um, one of them is something I sometimes do myself, which is making wings that could not really support the dragon because of the way they'd flap. These are butterfly wings, so they'd be a little different, but people often don't join. People often don't join enough of like a bat wing to the body. If you look at a bat, the wing actually joins to the whole body. But a lot of times when people draw dragons, they have like a tiny part connected, and you're like, if that dragon flapped, his wings would just come off. But I have been guilty of doing that on like baby dragons or more cartoony dragons. So it only bothers me if someone's doing like a really sort of realistic looking dragon, and then um, the wings are completely unrealistic for either their size or how they're connected. And then the one that really gets me is people who do absolutely beautiful dragons and don't open the mouths correctly. That's like my one pet peeve with really any creatures is when they draw a creature with an open mouth and the mouth isn't correct. It's probably because I put a lot of effort into learning how to do it right, but it's pretty simple when any living thing, for the most part, unless you're talking about a snake which can disjoint its jaw to eat things, opens its mouth. Our mouth moves in two directions. And I have seen a lot of artists do drawings where the top jaw doesn't move, just the bottom jaw opens. And so it looks like their jaw fell off or something. And I'm like, it's a beautifully drawn dragon. And then it's like, how did its mouth open like that? It should open like this because that's how mouths open. So I think that's like my only real pet peeve are like a few things like that because I think with the mouth thing, it just looks really weird. Um, and I think there's definitely just some dragons where I don't know. I think the artists were attempting something really crazy with like a perspective or an angle shot, and it did not work. There's, I won't say which one, but very early on in the 90s, 94 maybe, when Magic the Gathering first came out, there's a famous dragon in it, and they replaced the art for it in later iterations, but it was supposed to be, I guess, you looking up from underneath the dragon, and it just didn't work. It just looked really weird, and maybe like technically it was correct, and it was just something with the eye, but I try not to do those shots unless I can rig something up to really look at how that would work. And even then, try to get some objective people to look at it and tell me what's wrong. Well, yay, we get a couple more people in, and I hope you guys are all surviving the staying at home. I was saying it's not that different for me, except I really miss going out for coffee because it's kind of my break is to like say hi to everybody at the coffee shop, maybe sit with the regulars a little bit, those sorts of things, and I just can't do that right now. But it's okay because as I mentioned earlier in the video, I have gummy bears, which was something I super missed when we couldn't shop for a week and a half. So I'm happy now. And that's why I'm sitting here with, like, you might hear occasional crinkly sounds because I'm getting gummy bears. Because gummy bears. These gummy bears are all natural and they're tart, which is awesome. And they're 99 cents, which is even more awesome. So I don't have to feel so guilty about them. You miss getting time to yourself. Do you get less time to yourself or like a lot of people at home with you? Oh, Ninja Bear, that's awesome. I think it's great to see people dropping off groceries for friends or family members, even if a lot of hugging isn't always allowed. I like hearing the good stories because I feel like I've been seeing a lot of really negative stuff. Not as much at first, but definitely like this week. I think people are just getting tired and they're having trouble seeing any positives. Um, and I see it as at least we're doing this time because we've had plenty of viruses in the past where we haven't, and a lot of people have died. So at least we're being preemptive. It just is causing a lot of economic issues. And I know it doesn't help my saying this, but being stressed about them doesn't fix them. It doesn't make them better. I'm not saying spend money frivolously. I'm saying find something else you can do just to relax. Unfortunate for me. I mean, I'm obviously pretty concerned about money. I lost a lot of sales to canceled events, but I'm trying to do some things to cheer folks up, cheer myself up, and make art for as long as I can because I'm stuck at home anyway. Even if I couldn't keep my business going, it's not like I can go out and easily get a job or even freelance gigs right now because all that's on hold. So the best thing for me to do is just make art, make writing. Um, a spine specialist. I hope your spine can get fixed. When I lived in LA, I used to go to dance classes, and as much lighter weight than I am now, and even at 130 pounds, most people in the class were like a third lighter than me. Someone even asked me if I was pregnant, and they They thought I had spine issues to begin with because I was spending so much time um, with my job. I was doing graphic design, I was doing programming, and then I was doing art in my spare time. So when I first started dancing, I did not have a lot of flexibility in my back. And I don't really have a lot of time to dance anymore, but I do try to do stretches. Not elaborate ones, just like get up and move around and make sure I'm not locking my back up as badly as I used to. I've also given myself carpal tunnel and tennis elbow on occasion. Because apparently, inking like this, if you do it for like 8 hours a day, 4 days in a row, will give you tennis elbow. So maybe don't do that. Though I've learned a lot of it is tension. If I'm tense when I'm working, if I'm worried about getting things done on time, to the point that it's tensing my hand, the more that I tense my body, the more I mess myself up. So I'm trying to practice more awareness of that now than I did in my 20s, partly because it hurts more now. Yeah, spine surgery sounds kind of scary, guys. Okay, so let's see. He's holding a strawberry. So this is actually a normal sized strawberry. It's not a giant strawberry. It's just this dragon is smaller than people, and we'll have to figure out when I go to write about him what his scale is. I have to figure out if the strawberry is like an inch, then he's what, 8 inches or maybe 10 inches with his tail. And when I did my first field guide dragon scale, I actually did a lot of bizarre Googling to figure out the sizes of things that I was drawing so I could put the size of each dragon, because that book tells you the exact size of the dragon and they're in size order. And my Google history was really weird. It was like, what is the average height of an adult emperor penguin? And he's taking a nice big bite out of the strawberry, so when we paint him, he might have some strawberry juice on his face. I don't know. We'll see. He'll probably have some on his hands here that I do want to draw in. He's coming along. 4 feet. He wouldn't be 4 feet if the strawberry is that big. Because strawberries are really small for us. Are you guys just randomly throwing numbers at me? Oh, the penguins. Yes, they are. And I had, I think in that book I had a specific species of penguin and then a bunch of them, and they were in a picture with like the head of an ice dragon. So I had to figure out, or they were sitting on like his chest and his head was hanging over them almost like a cave. I had to figure out if his head was X number of penguins high and his head was which proportion to the rest of his body, how many penguins high he would be, and then I could figure out his size. Oh, hey, you can love sloths and penguins, Lily. There is nothing wrong with either one. They're both awesome creatures. My favorite creature, I know I mentioned this on one of my other streams, my favorite real world creature right now is not the best known one. And the first time I saw photos of it, I didn't think it was real. And everybody I've shown it to is like, that's a real thing. I love, it's a type of bird, and it's called a frogmouth. And it's called a frogmouth because it looks like you put a cartoon frogmouth in like a very squished, chubby owl. It is the weirdest thing. I absolutely love them. If you've never seen them, Google frogmouth birds. The expressions they make with their eyes. I love it. Okay, I'm not the only one who's seen those. Yeah, I did a fire one. I did a frogmouth phoenix in my last book just because I wanted an excuse to draw one, but I want to do something more with them. Um, Sloths are adorable, but they're kind of scary too. I feel like they could really. It's like the people who think they're going to get like a hug from a koala, and a koala will like bite you. A koala will scratch you. Like they can really hurt you if they get scared. They're, unless it's like a really tame one for photos. Don't try to take photos with an animal. I'm always seeing stories about like people who did that. Not quite sure what they were thinking. Almost like the people who come to Arizona and think it's cool to take pictures with javelina. I think some sloths are very laid back, but I have heard like I mean they're not the fastest moving, but if it's a wild animal, you still have to be careful, especially if they're a mom and there's young involved. You always kind of want to be aware of what's safe and what's not, because most of the injuries related to critters are from people who would have been fine if they just hadn't messed with them. So I'm going to use a lot of that snodgrassing technique on these wings. I'm going to draw in my wings like this, and I'm trying to decide if this should just be like a solid black butterfly wing. Yeah, they have very huge claws. Frog mouths are just so cute. I also really like that bird. I think it was in one of David Attenborough's specials, the one that can mimic any sound, including like rock music and chainsaws. That one's pretty crazy. Daniel said that I haven't done any ostrich or emu based things, and I think he's kind of right about that. I would like to do something with that. I have to think on what that would be. Because it would be cool to do like a hybrid dragon with one of them. Lyrebirds, that's what they're called, yes. And then I like all the critters that mimic other things. There's also, I believe it's an octopus that can appear to be like 20 different animals. It can make itself look like an eel. It can actually change its body shape, and then it can change its coloration. So it can look like coral or an eel or a number of different fish, depending on if it's trying to frighten away a larger creature or maybe like hunt a different kind of fish or something like that. But they were very rare, and for a while, no one believed they existed. So yeah, they're like I don't know where people say like, where do you get ideas and how could these things possibly exist? Because real nature just has so much cool stuff in it, and anytime someone tells me one of my creatures looks silly, I always am like, have you seen a platypus? Because platypi are pretty ridiculous. I'm just gonna zoom us back out here a bit. There we go. Daniel showed me a video. I think it went pretty viral, so maybe you guys have seen it. Of I think she was actually one of the experts at whatever aquarium it was, but this lady is talking about how smart dolphins are, like in front of one of the walls of like the tank where you see it from underwater, and the dolphin just goes quietly up behind her and like full on head bonks the glass and startles her, and then it laughs. Like it does that full dolphin like thing, which is he thought that video was great. He kept playing it over and over again. It was cracking me up. But it's weird how many things about animals we kind of assume to begin with. I know I went to a really cool lecture when I lived in Flagstaff, the end of 2007. To like think what year that was, about ravens and crows, and I read a number of books about them too because they're like some of my favorite birds. They're just awesome. Um, but it was amazing. They were talking a lot about this woman and how much work she had to do to prove that ravens and crows in particular, but that all birds have emotions. Like for many years, like until maybe 20 or 30 years ago, it was assumed that birds did not have emotions like humans or even other animals do. And I'm not sure why we would assume that. I mean, obviously, they're not going to exhibit them in maybe the way that a mammal would, but that's so strange to me. They didn't. They said they showed that that because they have such long lives, that birds can form huge connections with humans, um, like ravens do, a lot of the parrots do, and that they will actually grieve their owners and get depressed when if their owner passes away first, and that they have to make plans for like who's going to take care of this bird because this bird is going to be grieving and probably not eating for months after their owners die. So I thought it was very strange that there was like an assumption that they don't have emotions. Like, why would we think that? That's so weird. So this weird looking thing down here is going to be a kiwi because this is a strawberry kiwi dragon, and I have actually never drawn a kiwi before. but I looked at a bunch of photos of them, and this is actually just going to be sort of a cartoony representation of a kiwi, but birds do, they do, well, I don't think birds get as attacked as insects do. Um, I think people are really hard, like, so many people are afraid of spiders, and I think it's a little weird because I guess the only real critters I don't like are the ones that bite me. And spiders eat a lot of those ones, things like mosquitoes. So I'm not really sure where that fear comes from. I think it's good now there's um, a lot more TV shows and things that show like a positive side. Um, One of my first streams, I was talking about this anime we just finished about these little tiny people who live in the woods. And one of the characters I love the most is about halfway through the series, they get an upstairs neighbor, and it's like a beetle. And the beetle is like this completely girly character. Like she wears a bow on one of her beetle horns and has this adorable little voice. And I thought it's great if a kid sees this, um, because maybe they'll realize that you don't have to see them as something scary. And I wonder sometimes why it's like some critters. I mean, I get there's some kids like furry things, but plenty of spiders are actually really cute. So I think it's just how a lot of them are betrayed or like portrayed in media, and then also like there are some legitimate phobias, but it's actually usually based on the movement of critters with that many legs and stuff, versus like for me as a kid I was absolutely terrified of snakes, and it was actually the movement of snakes, because where I grew up we had tons of snakes. We had one here where we probably had 200 garter snakes in our property, and they would just startle me and I would just start hyperventilating and freak out. So it actually was a fear, like I would pass out. And I had to work really, really hard to get past that. By the time I was a teenager, I had, but it was really hard when I was younger. And now I can go to the reptile show here, and I don't always want to like hold a snake, but I'm fine around them as long as I don't get startled by them. And I've actually drawn plenty of them. I've had them on tables in front of me for days and workshops for painting and not had an issue. So but yeah, it was more the way they moved, and actually, the point that my mom is one of the awesome things my parents actually did when I was growing up. She made me kind of start to face my fear of snakes. Was because we had Christmas crackers. I don't know if you guys have those ever. I know a lot of people, at least out here in Arizona, had never heard of them, but they're like a traditional Christmas party favor, and you pull them, and they make like a snap sound, and then they have party favors inside them, toys and fortunes and those little paper crowns and stuff. And my brother got, I must have been like about a 4 inch long rubber snake in his that was really realistic looking. To date, it's probably the most realistic looking snake, fake snake I've ever seen. And we had a house with one of those, not a spiral staircase, but it like went up and around. It was kind of square. So you could walk up and drop something down the stairwell. And he would drop this fake snake on poor little 5-year-old me, who would just like freak out and pass out. And my mom got really mad and took it away from him eventually. And that was the point. She was like, you gotta start to face your fear. And what she did is she worked with me pretty diligently to get over my fear of the fake snake. And that really like kind of started the ball rolling to get rid of the fear of the other snakes. But we had like a pond, and our pond had these water snakes that must have been like an inch and a half, 2 inches around. They were black. They were really kind of terrifying to me as a child. So, and again, like this stuff would sneak up on you, like you wouldn't see it, and then there'd be like this huge snake in the grass. So that was probably why I had a fear to begin with, was just that more that surprise factor, and how they move and how quick they can move sometimes. And I definitely worked like really hard to get over it. And I know some people can't really work on those fears, but you can at least do things to lessen them, and especially if you've got kids, to like lessen their fear of creatures before they get older. Oh, come on! Have you ever seen a the video of the is it the shadow of the millipede, or I think it's a millipede when they're walking? So they actually kind of march. They're so cute. I did have a fear of scorpions a little bit as a kid because I grew up in upstate New York and we don't have scorpions there at all. and my grandmother was watching a nature program that was telling about how they would climb in people's shoes, and it had a sort of reenactment of this happening to this old lady, and it was terrifying to me at like 6 years of age. So I was definitely like, I'm going to check my shoes for the rest of my life person after that. But I don't actually think scorpions are that scary. It was more like that reenactment thing that scared me. It's weird the stuff that scares us as kids, though. Because we just rewatched a movie that absolutely traumatized me as a child, and I thought it was funny now, but I hadn't seen it since I was probably 7 or 8 years old. Because I don't think they'd transferred it to. I don't think they transferred it to any sort of like DVD or digital form till the last couple of years. Um, I think it's called the is it the Great Peanut Butter Experiment? Oh gosh, now I'm getting the name wrong. The Peanut Butter Solution, I think is what it's called. Um, and Daniel was just laughing at me because he'd never seen it. So we watched it and he's like, there's nothing scary about this. I'm like, but as a kid, everything that happens in this is stuff that you imagine terrifying as a child. The boy in the story sees something terrifying. You don't see what it is, which is partly what's so scary because then your imagination can go crazy. But because you don't see what it is, yeah, that kind of starts the build of it. And then the next morning he wakes up, and because of the fear, all of his hair has fallen out. And this was originally a French film that they also did, I guess, an English version of. I'm not quite sure how they did it because it certainly doesn't look dubbed. I don't know if they filmed it in both languages or what they did. Um, but first of all, the idea that all your hair could just fall out overnight from something scary, and yeah, and the unknown being scary, like that scared me to begin with. And then all the characters are really creepy in this. So he keeps seeing these ghosts who turn up, and they tell him and then they get him a wig so he can go back to school because he won't go back to school with no hair, which I understand is this poor kid is like, I'm bald. What happened? It won't grow back. And the wig gets like ripped off in the middle of this sports game and is like this traumatizing, embarrassing moment that would scare any child. And then yet these ghosts show up and they tell him this recipe, the great peanut butter solution, and that if he makes this bizarre recipe and puts it on his head, his hair will come back. But not to use too much peanut butter, and of course he does, and that's where things go horribly wrong. But the movie just gets weirder and weirder and weirder as you're watching it. Um, it's actually kind of like a really trippy, bizarre French version of something like Goonies because the characters are very likable, and it's a pretty fun movie. And I actually really enjoyed it now as an adult. But I think the situations in it as a child are too much like the things like that thing in the dark where you don't know what scared you, and the idea of super embarrassing situations and things completely out of your control, waking up one day and like all your hair is falling out. Like I had very thick long hair as a child, so that idea just the whole movie just terrified me. I think I was probably 6 or 7 when I saw it though. So um yeah, things left up to your imagination I think are always more frightening, and I think the best writers of scary things, whether they be TV show episodes, movies, horror movies, they understand that it's not necessarily about showing something that horrifying. It's about hinting at something horrifying so our imaginations can imagine what's the worst possible thing for each of us individually, which is much more scary, at least to me. If you're a Doctor Who fan, I think that's why the Weeping Angels are so scary because you never see them move. You just blink and suddenly they're 10 feet closer to you. And that definitely taps into childhood fears of things that we have. Yeah, I think if you look at like a lot of Asian horror, I'm not an expert, but I've seen a good deal of it. They tend to leave a lot more up to the imagination, and hint at things and have moments of suspense. I think part of the problem with some movies, particularly American movies, is we don't pace them correctly if we're trying to be scary. You need like moments where nothing is happening and maybe you just hear something creepy in the distance so people can start to like wonder what's coming. And I think if you just keep throwing things at people nonstop in a scary movie, they kind of become desensitized to it. And then it's not as terrifying as if you don't really know what's going on. There's a good buildup. The movies that have scared me the most are ones where they were so out there, I thought there had to be like some sort of paranormal thing in the movie, and then there was completely irrational explanation at the end. And oh man, that could really happen. Like that's scary to me. Or if the person behaves completely rationally, like they don't do something stupid, like hide behind all the chainsaws. If they actually behave in a way that a sensible person would, and it doesn't help at all, like that's way more scary to me than somebody just doing the classic like horror movie run screaming loudly trip over every object in the room. I still think some of those are fun, but I don't really think they're scary. Yeah, there we go. He's come on. If you guys have any questions about inking and stuff, I think you can have violence and blood, gore, whatever in a movie if it serves a purpose, either in the style of what you're trying to do or in the if it's important in emphasizing something in the storytelling of the movie. And the example I always give for that is I don't love really violent movies, but I think the violence is completely necessary in Pan's Labyrinth because they have these really scary looking fantastical monsters in it, and yet the humans through their violence and action are more terrifying than the monsters, and that juxtaposition is a huge part of the story. So I think it can serve a purpose, but I think having it there for shock value because you don't have kind of a story to begin with, or it's compensating for a story, it isn't good. It's like if I draw a picture and it looks awesome in ink, then it'll look even better in color. But if I draw a picture that doesn't look great in ink and I'm just using color to kind of compensate for that, it's not going to be as strong a picture. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff where that's sort of thrown in there. I mean, I'm a big fan of the TV series The Magicians, and there's definitely some ick factor in some of it, but it doesn't rest on that. And it balances that out with some funny stuff quite a bit. It is, I think, the only TV series with musical episodes where I actually love the musical episodes and look forward to them. Most TV series, when they're like, we're going to do a musical episode, I'm like, oh my God, why? But that one, they actually pick usually good 80s songs and they come up with a legitimate plot reason as to why the characters are singing that is comedic, such as licking the back of a magical hallucinogenic lizard. So I don't feel like it doesn't feel as kind of like forced or thrown together. I do also like the musical episode of Buffy because I think almost everyone likes that. It's kind of the exception, but and I mean I also think there's some movies where the gore can be sort of cartoony and silly. I like the Scream movies. I don't feel like they're realistically gory. Um, so I guess it really just depends. But if they're trying to do a serious movie, just a lot of like shock value gore in it is not really my thing. And if you look at a lot of classic movies that tear well, most of Hitchcock's stuff doesn't have much of any blood in it. Even Psycho has very minimal use of blood because that's not what's scary about it. So much of it is suspense. It's why I think, and I'm probably going to get yelled at for this by a lot of people, but it's why I really only like the first Resident Evil movie. The others are fine. They're kind of like, to me, they're just action movies. But the first one uses a lot of very classic suspense techniques where there are moments where not a lot is going on and you're just hearing things really far away in the background that sound creepy and it just builds like an atmosphere. And I feel like that was missing from a lot of the other ones that they've done, which makes me sad because I enjoyed that I did that, the first one. Okay. I suppose I should probably show at least a little bit on this wing, but since it's in the distance, I don't feel like I need to show as much. I just usually kind of suggest some lines back here. It looks pretty good so far. I feel like too, there's movies where you think the movie is fine and you enjoy it, and then there's movies where, and you can tell I'm a movie buff because I talk about movies a lot, but where you notice the pacing, because the pacing is just either so good or so bad. One of the issues I have with these longer and longer movies coming out is that sometimes I think that the writers and the directors are, oh, a bunch of fruit. That's awesome. But yeah, I think the writers and directors are kind of forced into doing longer stories than they maybe intended, and it throws the pacing off. There's a couple of movies where I'm like, man, if we just edited a half hour out, that movie would be so much more intense and better paced. And they just wanted to have it be a 3 hour film instead of a 2.5 hour film or a 2 hour film. And it wasn't necessary for the story. But there are others where I've seen a couple in the last few years where the pacing, like the one that surprised me was Happy Death Day. That movie does not waste a second. That movie is so beautifully paced. It has moments of suspense, moments of horror, and beautiful comedic timing moments. And if you've never seen it, it's kind of like, well, it's basically Groundhog Day meets Legally Blonde as a horror slasher film. As weird as that sounds. And after I saw it, and I was surprised at how good it was, because we just were just looking for something to watch, and it looked like a throwaway movie. But after I saw it, I looked up the writer and discovered that the writer of the first Happy Death Day film normally does not write films. In fact, that's the only film I think he's written. But what he does write are comics, and he wrote my absolute favorite series of X-Men comics back in the 90s. And then realizing that when I've rewatched it, you can tell that somebody worked on it who was thinking very visually in storytelling and in comics, because of the way the story is told. There's also a ton of Easter eggs in it for like movie buffs. But basically, without giving a lot of spoilers, it's about a young woman who is kind of bitchy. She's the blonde sorority girl. Nobody likes her that much. She's not the nicest person. She's pretty smart, but she maybe tries to hide that a bit. And on her birthday, somebody murders her, and then the day starts repeating, like Groundhog Day or many of those other movies. And she has to solve her own murder. And so it has that level of kind of Groundhog Day, someone not so nice trying to like become a better person through the day repeating, but it also has a murder mystery in it where she's trying to solve her own murder. Um, and what's so awesome about that for a slasher or horror movie is they get to do every single cliche because they get to loop the day over and over again, so they can have her run through abandoned hospitals and like and it's, they literally don't waste a second. It's such a beautiful, and I like the second one. The second one had a different writer. I guess they had like 25 scripts submitted, and I hear they're doing a third one, but each one is a different type of movie. So the first one is very much a suspense. I wouldn't necessarily say horror, borderline horror. I mean, horror in the style of like a classic slasher film, kind of, more like Scream or something. And then the second one is a straight up sci-fi movie, which is really cool. And I'm hoping we're going to get a third one. But yeah, I've seen it a bunch of times, and it is, if you're stuck at home and you're looking for something entertaining to watch, that to me is some of the most beautiful pacing that has been done since maybe the original Groundhog Day, because I don't really feel like that wasted time anywhere either. They really had a story to tell, and each iteration of the day you saw him go through uh, was awesome. But yeah, there's a lot of like movie posters hidden in. So like if you watch Happy Death Day, watch for all the like fun hidden movie posters from like cult films and stuff that they have in there, because they have a lot of really awesome stuff. And they do even mention day repeating things like Groundhog Day in the movie when they're trying to figure out what's going on, which I liked. So instead of saying, hey, we're a ripoff of this, they completely acknowledged that it was a similar situation. So every once in a while, those movies can surprise you. I tend to give, ever since I saw that, I tend to give Blumhouse movies more the benefit of the doubt, because they tend to be a little more original, do something a little different. We did see Get Out. I feel like Get Out, you only see it once because once you know the twist, that's kind of it. But it's a fun movie to watch as well. I think they named it that because probably every person in the theater was screaming, "Get out, you idiot!" the whole time. they were watching the film, but and I did see their version because they're doing all the Universal monster movies now. They're rebooting them again, but they're letting Blumhouse do the reboots. So they did the new Invisible Man, and I thought they did a really good job on that. Possibly too good a job because it was kind of upsetting because it's so realistic. Um, if you've ever had any kind of abuse in your life, maybe don't go see it alone or be aware that it might upset you. um, because it did upset me quite a bit. Uh, Not in a literal sense, but in there were enough sort of emotions the character was going through in Invisible Man that I could relate to. Um, and she pretty much makes that whole movie because, you don't see the bad guy because he's invisible for most of the movie. So it's all about the actress's reaction to him. Instead of them spending a huge amount of money on effects, they really just told a good story and she acted it really well. So I thought that was cool. And last night for a friend's birthday, we were Netflix party streaming Jupiter Ascending, which there's a huge debate as to who likes it and who doesn't. And I love it because, hello, there are space dragons, which are awesome. And I want one so bad. I wish someone would send me one. I was like, when it comes to my birthday, this is what I want. I want a space dragon. The space dragons, the way they do them too, they remind me of like all the old campy 80s movies. Um, I think the problem with Jupiter Ascending is a lot of people tried to watch it like a serious sci-fi movie and did not realize it was supposed to be a space opera. So it's more along the lines of like The Fifth Element, those sorts of things. So it's very, I mean, you have werewolf, well, not werewolf, part wolf Channing Tatum with guy liner and pointed ears fist fighting a space dragon in the movie. You really can't see it more like a Flash Gordon or a Fifth Element, but you see it in that light. It's awesome. And as an artist, it has some of the coolest designs for creatures, for planets, for clothing. Like I've seen it probably 5 times, and I own a copy. So for designs, my two favorite sci-fi movies in the last like 10 years have been Jupiter Ascending and Valerian. And I have the whole art book for Valerian. Daniel got it for me for my birthday because it has just like the coolest creature designs in it. And both of them, I think, bombed at theaters, which was really sad because I thoroughly enjoyed both movies. So I don't know. Maybe there aren't a lot of people who draw dragons going to see Jupiter Ascending, and that was the problem. Um, I also think maybe it was a little early. Like, I think Jupiter Ascending came out possibly, I think, before Guardians of the Galaxy. Because Guardians of the Galaxy has more of that, like, fun space opera ridiculousness thing going on. But I don't think that was as popular when Jupiter Ascending came out. So people didn't really know what to make of it. I think they were expecting, like, a serious, angsty sci fi movie and not something that was more like Men in Black or Fifth Element. But I enjoyed it. I think at least visually it's worth watching. But we got really weirded out when we realized that Eddie Redmayne is in it because I don't think I'd seen it again since I watched Fantastic Beasts. And I was like, wait, is that him doing like. It's not really a Batman voice, it's more like a Bane voice. Yeah, people went in with the wrong mindset. And I try not to have too much of a mindset. I mean, if it's hard if they're doing a movie based on a book and you've read the book and then you go in expecting it to be like that and it's something different. But I think in a lot of other cases, I just go to see whatever it's going to be, and I'm not going to expect like a Transformers movie to have the same impact on my life as something like Schindler's List might have because they're very different. I mean, a Transformers movie, really, my own expectation for it is I'm going to see giant robots and they're going to fight each other. Okay. I think he looks pretty good for a coloring book page. Let's see, I think I can zoom this out even a little bit more. There we go. I think he looks pretty good, and I'm gonna paint him. I'm just not sure if I'm gonna do that right now because I need to scan him first. So I guess I could just throw him on the scanner really quick. don't know how long a stream I want to do here. I like his grin too. He looks like he's just like, that strawberry is mine. And sometimes I draw the mouths over a few times on pieces if I don't feel like they have the right expressions. He's gonna be really pretty because I'm gonna get to do fun things with his wings. And I'm actually pretty happy with my kiwi, considering I never have drawn a kiwi before. I think it looks like a kiwi, so I'm all happy about that. So I wonder if I can actually scan this while we're in here, and then I can just start painting it. We'll see if my scanning software is going to cause issues. Since my scanner is pretty fast, we'll see if I can do this real quick. Meanwhile, let's see, do I got any other cool pictures I can show you guys? Oh, I was talking about this painting the other day, so I'll put him out here while we're scanning this one. Since I was talking about my tequila worm, this is my tequila worm. All right, it is scanning. I was going to put my AC on, but the cats are enjoying having the door open a ton right now. So, yeah, he's super cute. Super cute and super sweet because he intakes a large amount of sugar. He's definitely a fruit-driven dragon and definitely a fruit juice-driven dragon. I keep getting questions if I'm doing other fruits now. Are we doing cranberries and grapes? I know we have an orange juice Sprite or Pixie already going in the book. Okay, I think I'm going to use one of my favorite colors on him. And this is a color from the Shinhan watercolor set. It's called Peacock Green, which is actually, I would argue that Peacock Green might be a little more green and less blue than this, but I like this color, so I'm happy. Just because I want to really differentiate sort of the greens he's going to be from the greens of the kiwi, which are going to be really bright. I don't want him to completely match the kiwi. That would be weird. Oh, he's such a happy little guy. I think I draw happy dragons a lot because when I start drawing cranky dragons, eventually I get cranky. I don't know if I just take on the personality, but then again, some people say like their favorite pieces of mine are ones I painted when I was really angry at something. So I guess use that stuff as fuel when you can. It takes a lot to get me mad though, so it doesn't happen that often. I think these days I'm mostly annoyed and not mad. I'm pretty annoyed at all the people who think it's okay to still have mega church services in spite of being told that that is no longer legal in their states. And I heard they just went and arrested people for that. And that they said that they were going to continue holding church services until the end of days. So maybe they just think this is the end of days. I don't know. And I have nothing against church services, but it's pretty easy to do some sort of online option for people and still fall into the quarantine rules. So I don't know. Anyway, I hope everybody else is hanging in there okay. And I'm one of those artists that I like to mix my colors on the paper versus kind of ahead of time. I like the more sort of pleasant surprises you get of colors mixing. I really want to give him kind of a reddish nose here. Just to be careful because when red and green blend, they become brown, and I don't want to get this too brown. I just want it to kind of blend in a little bit. There we go. So he's going to have some kind of like pinker red colors like this. I also feel like I'm much faster when it comes to doing like a cute little dragon than I am with a lot of other creatures. Like unicorns taking me a lot longer. Horse anatomy, like I can do it. And like foxes, foxes are harder for me. I'm working on another kitsune painting because I've done the female form in for them of like the women who look sort of have fox ears but are mostly women of the sun and shadow ones, and then I've also done the shadow form of for like the fox form of it, and the person I did them for also really wants me to do the sun form. So yeah, I sometimes writing can help you with depression, or vice versa. Sometimes writing can make you depressed, depending on what type you're doing. Um, Definitely as a teenager, I did a lot of poetry when I was in that sort of, it sounds very cliched, but angsty, emo, teenage depression sort of thing. And then poetry sort of changed for me. I know I mentioned this in a previous stream too. I got really sick when I was 16 for almost a year. And for about 6 months of that year, I had mono. So it wasn't like, mostly was not life threatening. There was about a week where we had to make sure I was going to be able to swallow liquids and things. But uh, I was really tired and I couldn't do a lot. And that's when I started doing more drawing and doing a lot more writing because it was one of the few things I could do. I couldn't really play games and I'd fall asleep during movies, but with writing, I could at least write a page before I fell asleep. And my mom got me this book called Poem Crazy. It's one word. I believe the name of the author is Susan Goldsmith. And actually, I was recently on a panel with a really famous award-winning poet at TusCon, and I was amazed to find out that she'd read that book too and that she loved that book. And the woman who wrote the book, she teaches poetry in a variety of environments, including to children at juvenile delinquent centers as a way to deal with all the things they're going through, as a way to like express maybe their anger or other impulses in a more healthy way. And I'm not a big one for instructional books, especially instructional writing books. I'm really picky about them. I kind of like the ones that maybe inspire you a bit, but I don't like the ones that are, I don't know, here's how to do this ABC. It's just something that I can deal with that in like an art book, but it's harder for me in a book on how to write because to me, writing is sort of a more intuitive process in many ways. But that book, and I still have a worn copy, and then I got all her follow up books that have come out too. That book changed the entire way I saw words and the entire way I saw poetry. I can't recommend that enough if you write poetry. Um, it is just a beautiful book. And it made me start to think so much about, I almost feel like I was writing two dimensionally before I read that book, and then it made me write three dimensionally. It made me think about emotions, if emotions had smells or colors, things like that. And I think it really impacted my art too. Like it just changed how I created and just made me think about things in such a different way. Um, and that really changed how I wrote. I mean, I still definitely wrote some angsty stuff and some stuff when I was depressed, but I don't know, it just changed the way I thought about things. And I used to write basically to cope, not just with depression, but I had not such a great life situation all the way kind of up till my 30s when I was finally brave enough to put my foot down and say, nope, it's enough. I'm done. I need to actually have a life where I can be happy sometimes. And that can be really hard if we feel obligated to other people. I know a lot of kids and teenagers have a lot of pressure from their parents over what they're going to do for a living and things like that. But you can earn all the money in the world, and if you're unhappy, I don't think it's worth it. Oh, that's cool that you play guitar too. I think music is such a great way to deal with everything too. But the most important thing I was ever taught about depression, and I wish I could remember what book this came from, is that we have this weird thing in Western culture, particularly in America, somewhere in Europe, which is that we think depression is wrong. We think depression is bad. So when we have it, we actually feel even worse because we feel guilty or bad about being depressed, which is really unhealthy because depression is not necessarily a bad thing. There aren't really bad emotions. Emotions are our mind and body's way of letting us know stuff is going on. So if you feel depressed, that's probably what you need to be feeling at that time, and it's probably a time to stop and say, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing that my body is trying to let me know something's up, that my mind is trying to let me know something's up? For me, it usually means that I am off balance somewhere in my life. Maybe I'm not getting enough rest, things like that. Oh no, you have a guitar, Jinx? Hmm. This sounds like a great plot for a story. Like feel like you could start out with this idea of a character who every time they try to do something like play a guitar gets injured, and then come up with some bizarre reason for it, like a curse, and then spin an entire story out of that. Ooh. Oh, I've heard of Crazy Wise. I haven't seen it. But yeah, they talk about a lot of the problems, especially at the American mental health care situation, is that we view anyone who needs assistance with their mental health in a really negative way, as far as it can cost them job opportunities and things. So often people don't seek the help they do need. And some people, they need certain types of help. Some people need books. Some people do need like therapists. I mean, it's just different things. But I think absolutely everyone needs help sometime in their lives with how to mentally process and deal with things. It's just a fact of life. No matter how good you are at dealing with stuff in life, there will always be situations you don't expect that will come up, for sure. And you have to kind of figure out what you need, and that can be hard. We're kind of taught to be, especially, I think this could sound bad. I don't mean this in a sexist way, because I think I'm a huge supporter of gender equality, but I think there is a cultural trend, at least in America, for um, a lot of women to be really self-sacrificing and apologetic. And I know there's guys who do it too, um, for sure. But in the artist way, they call it the virtue syndrome. And so we say we can't do whatever it is that makes us happy. It might be drawing, writing, painting, creating. We can't do it because we have to be good people and we have to take care of everyone else. And it takes a lot to learn that you can't take care of everyone else if you're not taking care of yourself. And that it is perfectly fine to say, I need time to do the things that make me happy in life. And if people in your life aren't supporting that, then you need to look at those relationships because they might not be very healthy. Oh, it's awesome that you're a peer counselor. Counseling would take like a lot out of me. I know even just teaching art classes when the kids kind of needed some mental and emotional support took a lot out of me. So anybody who does counseling, I think that's so admirable because it's so much work, and it's very draining. So I think that's one of those things where you have to really be sure to not take your work home with you and replenish your spirit on a regular basis. I can't remember where I read it, but they said people are like batteries. And if you put a charged battery next to a flat battery, you really can't visually see the difference. But one is a lot more useful than the other. And everybody has things in life that recharge them, and you have to figure out what your thing is. For some people, it might be jogging or playing tennis or skydiving or swimming. For other people, it might be writing or painting. But whatever that thing is, you have to figure out what that is and you have to make space for it. Because if you keep running your battery down and you only ever go around at a quarter charge or a half charge, you can't even help other people. You can't do that much for anybody. So it's important to be sure that those things are attended to. And it's something I've really learned with the type of work I do. Like, there's certain clerical jobs I really needed to get to today, but after we had lunch, I was like, I'm going to paint because I can tell mentally, like, I need it. I was very stressed out. And I'm really fortunate that I live with someone who is as much of a loner as I am. We give each other space, um, which really matters. But then we also are pretty supportive of each other. And I'm thankful for that every single day because I've lived with other people in my life, family, boyfriends, things like that, and it wasn't all bad, but it certainly wasn't always healthy. I think people having the space to be themselves is so important. Oh, well, thank you for agreeing with me. That's always nice. um, but I mean, I feel like I'm still learning about my own mental health and how to take care of myself. And I think each person is so different. There's never going to be one solution that's right for everybody, but we have to try to provide as much information as we can so you can kind of work through it. I know I've had a lot of people mention like insomnia recently, and I had to work through a lot in my teens and early 20s to deal with what would keep me awake at night. I still haven't figured out how to stop having nightmares, except usually when I have nightmares, it's because I'm not dealing with something and I'm shoving it to the back of my mind and then it's coming back and bothering me later. in my sleep. So, kind of by dealing with those things and trying not to be anxious about how I've dealt with those things, um, usually helps a lot. But for sleep, the thing helped me is I just had to find a ton of both mental and physical relaxation techniques so that I could slow down my thought patterns and put my brain to sleep. And one of the things that super duper helps me is the CD I've had for years, and I'm sure there's digital copies now, but it actually is something I have as a fluke because we heard an ad for these. My friend and I heard an ad for these things when I lived in LA for theta frequency CDs, and I said that sounds like some complete, just like gimmicky. I won't use the language I used, but nonsense. um, there's no way that those work. But we said, you know what? They have a sample, like a half hour sample thing you can listen to on their website. Let's see what it does. And my friend said, hey, I took a 15-minute break at work and put this on and I fell sound asleep. And I was like, well, that's weird. And then I listened to it and it just made me feel so relaxed. So I immediately got a bunch of CDs from that series and they have always helped me go to sleep. And what it is there's just certain frequencies in music that can help. It doesn't help everybody, but for some people, it does help you just relax and fall asleep. And the theta frequency ones work really well for me. It turns out they work pretty well for my boyfriend too. So that's kind of we have like a go to CD that just, it only helps maybe 80% of the time. I think a lot of people have depression. I actually think depression is, especially if you're a creative person, I think it's completely normal. I found it's just sort of like a cycle in my life where I will get depressed sometimes. But I also know that it's, like I said, it's usually a message from my mind and body that I need to take a time out and kind of assess and figure out what's going on. So I think there are cases where you can have chemical imbalances where medication is necessary, or you can take medication while you're figuring out what's up. But if you only rely on the medication and you never address what's causing it, then you're sort of trying to push through that stuff instead of listening to your mind and body saying, hey, something's wrong here. We need to deal with it. And I don't think there's always solutions. Um, I've kind of mentioned this a little, but I don't really talk to my parents anymore due to things that happened, and I haven't talked to them for about 7 or 8 years. And I was having a really hard time when I first had to make that decision because I would talk to my mom every day before that. So I had a ton of guilt and nightmares and depression, and it did take me all to work through, and it really wasn't anything that could be rushed. It just made the best of it and found people who were really positive in my life. And I found that a lot of the things that they also do for medication, sometimes you can um, also do with exercise. Because I can't take medication for depression because me and most medications do not mix so well. I tend to be very sensitive to them. So I have to take like half doses of cold and flu meds and stuff because I'll just fall asleep for like 12 hours if I take the normal one, which isn't always a bad thing. But when I have had any kind of medication that's a little stronger, even just like stronger painkillers can make me depressed. So it's something I've had to kind of work on. And I think it's the best thing is probably a hybrid, like know what medication helps you if you need it. And if you are someone where therapy helps, do that. If you're someone where walking helps, I mean, exercise is a huge thing. Usually, if I get depressed, it's because I'm not getting enough sleep, enough exercise. I'm maybe eating the wrong kinds of foods. I'm very careful if I'm doing like conventions and big events, what kind of food I'm eating because I'm around thousands of people and talking to people all day, which I love in some ways, but it's a different kind of interaction than I have on a daily basis. And it can be really draining. So if I eat like pizza and junk food that doesn't give me good, healthy energy, I end up by like day 3 of the convention in a really bad place, just physically and emotionally. And once I figured that out after a couple years of conventions, people thought I was weird. They're like, "Oh, you're such a health nut," and it's like, not at home. But man, I'm at a convention. I'm not going to eat pizza. I'm going to go find myself some Thai food or a salad or something, because all of those things can contribute to your mental and physical health. Oh, he's so cute. Not that you guys need all of my 2 cents on it, because obviously we're all different, and what helps one person doesn't necessarily help another. But hey, if I can mention theta frequency CDs and they help a few people with insomnia, I'm gonna mention it because they made a huge difference for me. I've also done all sorts of hypnosis CDs for just like relaxation. I don't really find that they work for anything else in my life, but some of them for like relaxation, I will always like fall asleep halfway through them. So I really hope the other half isn't like programming me to become like some sort of horrible serial killer or something. Let's hope there's nothing in the other half of my CDs that's bad. Uh, oh, and sometimes the videos on how to draw will put me to sleep. There's a whole series of videos from Nomon in Hollywood from the school that I went to, and I love them, but I kept falling asleep during them, so I realized that they will actually put me to sleep, because watching somebody draw with like very soothing music in the background is just, I don't know, it shuts off the parts of my brain that are thinking about other things. So, but people are all different, so I don't think there's like one solution that works for everybody. Yeah, I think sharing ideas is good. I think we don't talk a lot about that stuff. I think there's kind of a myth, especially if you are like a professional artist or musician or whatever, that none of us ever get depressed and we're all perfect people all the time and happy. And, nobody is. Everybody has a range of emotions, and they're going to do different things at different times. And part of becoming an adult is figuring out how to deal with those things and then what works for you. And it isn't going to be like a blanket solution where every single person can use the same thing. I mean, for me, drawing and painting was kind of a relaxation thing to begin with, that then ended up becoming a job. And that was a choice that I made. When I worked in sort of tech, it was a much higher paying environment, but the stress level was really bad, and I know it wasn't good for my health. And I just decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I was starting to make some decent funds on Kickstarter that I could do it more full time, and I was doing a lot of conventions, which I don't do quite as many anymore. And I just decided that I would rather be a happier person than a wealthier person. And again, like those are all personal choices. Yeah, that if there was one thing that worked for everybody, we'd probably all live in one city that was duplicated around the world. We'd all eat the exact same thing and sleep the exact same number of hours and those things. And that's not true. Everybody's bodies are different. I had a really good doctor at one point tell me that they'll tell you like what your diet is, but so much of what is natural for you to eat can actually have to do with your genetic heritage. I have a ton of Northern European in me, and Northern Europeans historically have consumed a lot of dairy products. And for me, I'm just a person who drinks a lot of milk. So I tend to drink like 1 or 2% milk and try to be aware of it. But she said if it's something I crave a lot and they aren't getting weird stuff on blood tests or anything, then my body just wants more calcium and wants more of that. And it's probably just something from my lineage, and not to worry about it. Because and that's why I hate these like fad diets of like, they'll make anyone lose weight, because we're all different people. And the only diet I have ever liked is one called the full plate diet, that is not really a diet. It's a guide to more eating healthy. And it goes with the idea that when we crave something, there's a reason for it. So if you deny craving something, it actually stresses you out a bit, usually because you end up thinking about it even more and you're struggling with your willpower. So, stress actually creates cortisol in your body. It actually can make you gain weight. So, all these diets where you deny things, sometimes they don't work that well for people because they're creating so much stress and cravings that they can't keep it up long term, and it's not like healthy for your life. So the full plate diet says, hey, if you're craving mashed potatoes, have mashed potatoes, but find a way to have fresh salsa with your mashed potatoes, or other things that make it just a little bit healthier and higher in fiber. And that kind of changed the way I ate a lot. I don't think we've been eating that healthy recently because we couldn't shop for a bit for quarantine reasons. So we were eating a lot of like takeout and trying to get salads and takeout occasionally, but I definitely prefer to cook myself. um, and I totally made a cake yesterday, so that probably wasn't that healthy, but making the cake was very relaxing. So this guy's coming along pretty good. He's actually coming along pretty fast. And I did end up ordering more white ink. I mentioned another stream, I'm running really low on it. And I got a different brand because the one I usually get was really overpriced online compared to just grabbing it at the store. And I think it's a good brand, so we'll see. It gets here, I think, in like 2 days. And I try to like think, right now we have all this stuff going on, but I try to think of all the things I am thankful for, like that we have services like Amazon, that we can get things delivered to our homes if we can't go out, that we have DoorDash and Grubhub and the internet so we can stream art or music or have movie watching parties, at least, or talk to each other on video. At least there's ways we can stay in touch and things. We're not waiting for news in the mail that comes every 10 days or something like that. Uh, so I'm pretty thankful for that stuff, and I try to kind of focus on that. That as bad as things are, there's a lot of situations where they could be worse. And it's not that I'm dismissing the severity of things. I'm trying to see the positive side, because if I get really depressed about it, it's not going to help anybody. So at least this way I can show you guys some art. We could talk about life, the universe, and all the weird stuff out there. Recommend books and movies and stuff like that, and hopefully inspire some other people to go pick up a paintbrush or some other creative medium. At least entertain you guys a little bit. This guy's so happy. He's such a happy little cherry dragon. I think my lighting is making this look a little more contrasty than it is, just because it was so sunny earlier. I had to close up my curtains here, but let me see. There we go. That's some more natural lighting on him. Yeah, it looks a little better. He just looks so happy. Yeah, I think those of us too who are in our late 20s kind of through our 30s, I'm in my late 30s. We remember before you could stream. Remember before, not just before the internet, but before like movies and music were this accessible. And I always try to remind myself of that. Like, how awesome is it that we can look up facts from all over the world and access music from all over the world? We have all that at our fingertips, and for many people in the past, that's like a form of magic, and it's really cool. And at least if we're stuck at home, we have that. Looks pretty good. And I'm not talking a ton about my art technique. I've gone over it a lot in videos, but I'm always happy to do that if people want more tutorials and questions versus me rambling about books and movies and things. We've been watching this super weird series on Hulu. It's an anime series that's pretty new. And you can always tell if they're pretty new, not just by the release date, but by the fact that they're only subtitled and they haven't done like a dub of them. And then I don't know if they're going to on this one, but it's sort of the strangest take on Sherlock Holmes I've ever seen. You remember before computers? It'd be hard for me to do that because both of my parents worked with computers in the 60s and 70s, so they were always around. But before we all had computers, I do remember that. I remember what a big deal it was to get those. Well, yeah, of course, because he took a big bite out of it. So, of course, there's going to be juice all over his hand. Then I'm going to do something with some juice probably around this painted the kiwi before. So, I had to figure out. I know they're kind of whitish in some ways. Like they're green, but they're also kind of whitish. So, I wanted to have it go from this sort of more saturated, brighter green at the edge to like a more white middle part. So what I do is I kind of outline it, and then while it's wet, I'm just going to put water on the brush. And this is the cool thing about watercolor is you can just blend with just water. And it creates this very gradual. Oh, scoot this up a little for you guys. Our first computer was was one of the ones that used the punch tape. And I remember our first plotter too, before there were home printers. I think it's good though. I think it means that we so value the fact that we can get a song at our fingertips in a matter of seconds. It's such a different thing. You know, even 15 years ago, you couldn't do that. I couldn't do this for a living. I couldn't put books out even 12 or 13 years ago. I couldn't put books out the way I am now. We didn't have crowdfunding. Printing presses and publishing weren't as automated as they are now, so you couldn't do an on-demand printing of a book, all those sorts of things. So it's really cool that there is so much that we have. And I try to kind of focus on that right now because there's always going to be negative stuff in life. And right now I know it seems like there's a lot of negative stuff, but there's always going to be both negative and positive stuff in life. It's sort of like I don't like anti-war protests because that's putting focus on war. I think it's better to have pro-peace events that educate people and try to create better communication and prevent, conflict, protesting conflict, because again, your focus is just even from the words, it's on the conflict versus on peace. So I think I try to approach life in that same sort of way, to just focus on if a bad thing has happened in my day-to-day life, what's the next good thing I can kind of look forward to? I often get just really run down if we do, well, like Festival of Books, which we didn't get to do because it got canceled, but I usually, even though it's only 2 days plus a setup day, it's really, really exhausting for me. Because I maybe get 2 bathroom breaks and I'm probably talking to 400 or 500 people every hour or two. I'm talking to thousands of people all day long, and I enjoy it in many ways. It's cool because I get to, especially with the kids, I get to see what they think of my work, but it just exhausts me. And me being me, what happens is if there's like orders that come in online while I'm at the conventions or things like that, I feel guilty if I don't jump right back into work like the Monday after. And we found that's always a really bad mistake because at best I end up really, really tired and then I'm cranky and I'm no fun to be around. And at worst I get sick and then I lose a couple of days of work. So what I've started to do is after a big event like that, I'll maybe give myself I'll allow myself to work maybe like 2 hours the next morning to just catch up on any emails and get back to people so they're not waiting more than a couple of days. But then what we usually do, and of course, right now we can't do this because everything's closed, is we pre-buy specific movie tickets to a movie we want to see Monday morning. And if Daniel's helping me with an event, he'll take Monday off, and that's what we do. And first of all, first thing in the morning, tickets here at Roadhouse are like $5, so you're only spending about with online fees like $12 for us to see a movie, so we can then get some popcorn and some food. And we actually have a whole free popcorn system here because we eat so much popcorn. We buy popcorn shirts every year. So we maybe have to pay for food or a drink, but it's not super expensive. And if we've had a good convention, I've usually made some money, so that's okay. And it's just a way to we've already got tickets, so we got to go. So it's a way to make me sit in a really comfortable reclining movie seat watch a movie, just take my mind completely off of work and getting back at it and the whole weekend. And it really helps so much that we try to do that every time. Um, if there's a movie out we want to see, otherwise it's kind of a problem. But then sometimes we pick something we're not sure about and we end up pleasantly surprised by the movie. So that also works. But that's sort of like for me has been the thing. And I used to feel guilty about it, like, all my online fans are going to get so mad if I don't get right back to work. And then I was like, no, you guys aren't. You're going to be like, get a little bit of rest so you can do better work the next day. Um, so that's definitely been a huge thing. And I'd go to the movies occasionally, I think, before Daniel and I got together. But we both love movies and we both used to work at video stores. And then right after we got together, we started to discover Roadhouse, and that changed how I see movies because their seats are so comfortable, they're not expensive, and they have amazing popcorn that is pretty much unlimited. So for us, that's always a good recharge, just to get lost in some other thing. Um, it's definitely helped. And actually, what would happen is I'd get either, if I didn't get sick, I'd actually end up depressed because I'd just be so run down, just because I'm not entirely an introvert or an extrovert. Like, I love talking to people. Obviously, I'm on Twitch. Um, and I love talking to people at conventions, but I have to kind of have periods of both things as a creator. So if I have like 2 or even 3 or 4 days at an event where it's all like extrovert stuff nonstop, I have to do something to recharge, or I'm just going to become a really depressed or sick person following that. So I think part of growing up and being an adult is just learning kind of those patterns for yourself. Um, I mean, we're all told you need 8 hours of sleep, whatever it is, but it's so specific to a given person as to what works for them and what they need. And I think this guy's almost done. I'm just debating what kind of color I want to give his tail. And I actually think I did this pretty fast, so that's cool. And this is going to get mailed out to somebody in the next couple of days. I mail out around 6 paintings this size every month to Patreon subscribers, and they just get all kinds of fun little critters in the mail that later show up in my books. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to kind of make them look cool. I know, looking at photos and stuff, like real kiwis don't have some of this darker blue, but I felt like for the painting, it kind of needed it. um, it's not bad for having never painted a kiwi before. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but one of my favorite series for a comical look at the kind of artist I am not is a sitcom, and I actually don't like very many sitcoms. I don't know why. It's like very few that I like, but it's a sitcom called Spaced that Simon Pegg did before he did things like Shaun of the Dead, and it's a lot of the same cast in that. It's Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. And the funny part of it is that Simon Pegg's character in it actually is more of an artist like me. He's a comic book artist in it, and he's quite talented. But in the very beginning, they end up moving into this apartment building. He and this female character, who's one of the main characters of the show, and the moisture is reflecting the dragon's color. Yes, exactly. Well, that's actually true. Like, things around in the environment are going to reflect on each other. So I'll give him a little more of that color kind of in here. But yeah, they move in, and one of the neighbors in this apartment building is this artist named Brian. And whenever he's just one of my favorite characters because he is exactly the stereotypical thing that a lot of people think artists are. And whenever someone asks him, well, what sort of art do you do? They just go through this flash of him making art, and he just says anger, and then it's just him hurling paint at a canvas and pain. And it's so funny because I've actually known a lot of artists like that, and it is one type of artist. But it's so exaggerated, it just cracks me up, and it will always crack me up. And every couple of years I want to go back and rewatch that entire series. I think they did like a season and a half, or maybe it's 2 seasons, but one's really short. And it's just called Spaced, and it's just about Simon Pegg and this gal who's his roommate, and all of the other weird people in this apartment building. Basically, in the beginning of the series, Simon Pegg's girlfriend dumps him in a very bad way. And so he's looking for an apartment. So he's sitting at a coffee shop looking at um, like ads for rentals. And then this other gal, I think her name is Daisy, she's also there because she's living with some people she's not getting along with. And I don't think she's going through a breakup. I think she actually still has a boyfriend, but he's like a long distance one or something. And so they keep seeing each other at this coffee shop as they're both apartment hunting. And it just keeps going badly for both of them. And they're kind of comparing notes and talking about how bad it is. And then they see this like absolutely perfect apartment listing, but it's only for a professional couple. So they decide that they're going to pretend to be a couple in order to rent the perfect apartment. And that's kind of the basic premise in like the first 20 minutes of episode 1 that the whole series sort of builds out on. And Nick Frost plays Simon Pegg's character's best friend, who is obsessed with the military. And it is just a very silly little sitcom series. But it has a lot of like very weird, funny, stereotyped characters in it. And the artist one just, at one point in the series, Brian ends up in a very good relationship, and he eventually has to end it, not because it's bad, but because it's going so well that he's not depressed enough to make good art anymore. Which I thought was so funny because I've actually heard of things like that happening, and it's this odd stereotype that artists can't be healthy people. I definitely felt when I lived in LA like I couldn't have a healthy relationship and be an artist, and it sounds very silly to say, but um it's such an easy like thing to fall into if you can't find a relationship where the person you're with really supports your weird habits or what you do. It can seem like there's something wrong with the relationship, but that there's something wrong with what you're doing as a creator or those sorts of things. So it took me a while to kind of learn all those things. But yeah, I think for a while Amazon had it. It might be on something else now, but if you need a good laugh, and you like a lot of the other Simon Pegg movies, everybody says, "Who would you meet as a celebrity?" And I was like, I wouldn't meet somebody I had a crush on. I would like, there's people I'd like to meet who've just made entertaining things, and I think I would enjoy having a conversation with Simon Pegg. He seems like a really cool dude, um, with who's just really funny. So I feel like that would just be an enjoyable experience. I'm also a big fan of Shaun of the Dead, somewhat, and Hot Fuzz. I'm a big fan of Hot Fuzz because Hot Fuzz is directly spoofing an early episode of Midsummer Murders. And the episode it spoofs, I believe, has Orlando Bloom in it, very young. And I heard that the story is he actually got the call on the set of Midsummer Murders right after his character is stabbed with a pitchfork. He got the call that he was going to be in Lord of the Rings. So, yeah, if you're also not a Midsummer Murders fan and you want to watch a lot of very famous people die in bizarre ways, almost every British actor has been in there somewhere, and some of their deaths are just like drownings and things, but other cases there are people who get bludgeoned to death with wheels of cheese and things like that, and it's all very there we go. Getting my little bit of white ink I have left. It's all very eccentric sorts of characters, and it's a brilliant format because just like Hot Fuzz, it's tiny, tiny towns. So they have to call in kind of an overall police force when there's a murder because the local cop or two isn't equipped to deal with serious crime. Uh, oh yay, someone older than me watches Midsummer Murders. If you're not part of the Midsummer Murders Facebook group, like the official one, it's also one of the funniest Facebook groups. The memes in there are very inappropriate, but are really funny. They always make me laugh. The police force, the brilliant format is like they get to do an entirely new cast of characters except for 3 or 4 central characters every episode, and they can be as ridiculous as they want them to be, and I think that's pretty genius. It also means it's pretty expensive because they're kind of using new sets. They actually film in real towns, real tiny towns all over the UK. So I heard when they were doing one of the Christmas episodes, it was actually in July, and half the extras were passing out between takes because it was so hot and they all had to be wearing winter jackets. Uh, but it's very enjoyable, and it's on a lot of streaming stuff as well. And there's like 100 some odd hour and a half movies, basically, because each episode is essentially a movie. So the seasons aren't very long because each episode is an hour and a half. Um, that's another one of my fun, relaxing things. I like some of the more serious ones too, but the problem is sometimes they're like so heavy. Like I started watching Broadchurch and I got through season one and I got partway into season two and I just had to stop. I'm gonna try to go back to it at some point because I think the acting is great and I think the stories are great, but it's so heavy. Um, and I don't think it's healthy to watch that kind of stuff too much for me because then I just end up, I don't know, it puts me in like a really weird mood. I started watching Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which I love, but the last episode, like, and I never cry. I never cry at TV very much. It made me cry. Like, it was sneaky of them because they're usually pretty comedic, and I think they did a build up to a sad episode. So, without any spoilers, warning that episode is a heavy one to watch. And like I said, I don't know which stream I saw this, and I don't really like musicals. Well, I said that musical episodes of things, but I also don't really like musicals or musical TV series. So it's very unusual that I'm kind of hooked on Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist as well because there's a lot of singing in it. But again, I think it's their song choices, um, and the cast, and the fact that they don't really pay attention to the gender of the original singer of a given song. So you can end up with some pretty funny situations. And I think it's also because it's written where she hates people singing, and then she gets this power where people are singing around her all of the time. That makes her go nuts. So I know we got like 3 or 4 people watching. You guys are pretty quiet. You guys all surviving the crazy, hanging in there. I think I watch and read a pretty big variety of things. I'm not really locked into like just murder mysteries or just comedies. It just depends on like kind of the cast and the story. And if it's enjoyable. Or sometimes if it's really dumb. I like really dumb movies on occasion too. Not like I don't know, I guess my example, not like full Will Ferrell level dumb, but I can get close to that and enjoy it. This guy is almost done. So I'm just using, and my white ink it's okay. This one's kind of dying on me. I'm having to dip directly in the jar, which is really going to mess up my brush. I have to wash this brush really well afterwards. Just because even the eyedropper won't pull ink out of here because I'm almost out. But in a few days, I will have a nice new jar of ink I am very excited about. I actually found a Japanese brand that I want to try, so we shall see if that works. But yeah, this isn't coming out as white as it usually does, so I'm having to go over things a little. But my last step is always to kind of pop everything out with some white ink for highlights. And if you use it a little more watered down, it's very subtle. And if you kind of use it more pure, it gives these bolder white colors. And I have left the spots on the wing alone. I'm actually going to do those in black. I left them kind of just outlined so we could have a coloring book page, and if folks want to make those different, they can. But for my version, I'm actually going to make them black. I think this guy is just about done. I'm going to leave some of this lighter color, I think, in his tail here. I try to leave enough whites and stuff showing through, and I don't really think my kiwi needs any highlights. I think maybe 1 or 2, but make it look a little wetter along the edge, but I think it looks pretty good as is. And I try not to put in highlights just for the sake of highlights. I think they They have to really be part of what's needed. So I'm just about done. If anybody has questions, comments, or just general stuff they want to talk about in the next 2 or 3 minutes while I finish him up. Oh, and if you are enjoying me streaming, I actually changed my stream this time so it has kind of a border and it has my website address and stuff in it. Kind of inspired by Vamp Felines last night. She had a really awesome border around her DJ stream, and I was like, "Oh, that's a cool way to kind of frame what you're doing." So you can always go to my website and stuff. But if you want to be notified of future streams, make sure you click to follow me here on Twitch, and then I'll just let you know when I'm streaming. I am going to try to do some more formal like events for bigger paintings as well, but for like these little ones, I usually have to get these done every day, so I've just been popping on here and doing streams of me getting work done. I did one with like a full sketch from start to finish the other day. We did one yesterday evening where I just was doing color, kind of like I'm doing on this guy now. So they're all a little different. And nothing says, by the way, when you're painting that you can't go back in with black ink or a pen or change things, adjust them if you accidentally paint over something with your white ink or something needs to be darker. You could totally do that. Let's see, do I have this zoomed out? There we go. So we can kind of see him in his entirety here. I super appreciate, I know a couple of you have been coming in and out of the room and hanging out chatting with me, which is fun. I'm glad I'm not the only weird person who watches Midsummer Murders. I just love how many famous people they've kind of killed in it, which sounds terrible, but I think for actors it's a way to be like, hey, I was killed in that episode, and here's the weird way my character died. I think if it weren't so comedic, it would probably be more disturbing, but there's definitely a comedy level to it. Just adding a few more things where I think they're needed. I wanted to kind of clean up this wing, and actually wanted to emphasize this spiral here in ink, and this one here. There we go. Oh, thank you. I really like how he's coming out too. Or it could be a she. This might be a she. I always say he, but it could totally be a she as well. I think the actors have fun doing those little parts too. I think though that's why they can only do like sometimes the last season just had like 4 episodes because they have to work around the schedules of some pretty big actors. They have to work around filming schedules for using real pubs and houses and villages all over the UK. So it's a lot. I love discovering kind of weird little series like that too. I don't know if it's still streaming on anything, but 2 or 3 years ago, we fell in love with Stephen Fry's series Kingdom. And I know there's more than one series called Kingdom, but the one with him in it. Unfortunately, I think it's only like 1 season. It might be 2. It's really short. But he plays a lawyer, and it's sort of just about the comedic situations and people in the small town where he works. And there's some very eccentric characters, and I love me a good eccentric character. I think I watched way too much Doctor Who and All Creatures Great and Small and just like a lot of British TV as a kid. So anytime I can be amused by an over-the-top character played by some crazy British actor, I like it. And I have a whole list of like weird little movies I tend to recommend that people have never seen. Frequently asked questions about time travel. If you're at all nerdy, that one should be really high on your list. It always reminds me a little bit of Simon Pegg's stuff, even though he's not in it and had nothing to do with it. It does have both a British and an American cast, but it's because it's all filmed, almost all filmed inside one pub that is very similar to the pub in Shaun of the Dead. The Winchester, it's a very similar pub, but It's about two nerdy guys and their one friend who is not nerdy and he really hates sci-fi, and so he's just sort of annoyed at them at the pub one night, and they accidentally discover a leak in the bathroom, and it's a leak through space and time. So they keep accidentally traveling backwards and forwards in time in this one pub, and it is. I would put it up there with like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's just a beautiful little time travel movie. It's very cleverly done. Like it makes you want to go back and watch it again to see things you missed because things happening in the background of scenes are caused by them when they loop back around through time a few times. Like it's a really cool little movie. I don't think it was very expensive to film. It was just neat. It has a whole bunch of British actors, but then there's sort of a sort of I wouldn't say a cop, but a time fixing character. Like she's sent from the future. They fix leaks in space and time, and for some reason, she's one of the only Americans in the cast, and she's not very good at her job. And she's played by Anna Faris, who I love. So she's just a little bit of a ditz, which makes it all that all the better. But we watched it a couple years ago for my birthday, and then I made everybody go to the pub afterwards, uh, just kind of as a joke because everyone was afraid to go to the bathroom at the pub in case they ended up in prehistoric times or the distant future or anything like that. But yeah, if you love fun sci-fi movies that are a little bit different in character movies, I definitely would recommend that one. I always try to specify what sorts of people would like movies I'm suggesting to because I'm never expecting everyone to like the movies I like. I don't think there's just good movies and bad movies. I think just depends what you like in a movie. Because there's definitely some bad movies that I'll even admit are bad that lots of people love, including me. Um, like I have a soft spot for the old Mario Bros movie that's so bad, but it's so bad it's kind of like become a cult classic. Um, I'm a big fan of Buckaroo Banzai, and some people think that movie is terrible. I think it's amazing. Stuff like that. I love weird, quirky movies. So I really miss going to the movies. Not that there's a lot out that we want to see, but it kind of bugs me that if I wanted to see a movie that's in the theater, they are available to stream instead, but they're $20 and you don't get to keep the movie afterwards. I'm like, whoa, it should either be like $10, $15, $12 to rent it if it's in the theater. That seems reasonable to me. Or if you're paying 20 to 25, I think you should also like own the movie. Maybe you don't own the movie to rewatch till it comes out in a month or two or something, but I think there's got to be some sort of in between because like I said, we go see morning showings, so we're only paying about $5 or $6 for our tickets. So paying $20 for us to see a movie at home where we don't get to keep it is kind of not so good. So we're kind of just waiting on some of those. And I'm wondering if they're holding the release on some of the bigger movies because they're kind of just waiting to see what happens. All right. I think he is pretty close to done. I'm just kind of going back in with a pen and punching up anything I felt needed it from the paint. But I think our Strawberry Kiwi Dragon is pretty done. And if anybody has any last questions, I would be happy to answer them. We're right at 2 hours, which is how long I said it usually takes me. So I'm kind of impressed that I can ink and paint something in 2 hours. So I feel like it used to take me about 3 to do something like this. So I think doing it every day helps. Oh, I had a friend who had some weird narcoleptic issues too, and it's tough when you can't control it that much. I stopped going to the movies because the seats were so uncomfortable, but now that we have Roadhouse and awesome food and stuff like that, it's kind of changed things for me. I actually love that they do popcorn shirts, but they're quotes from movies with neat art, so you'd want the shirt anyway. And then it gets you free popcorn for a year, so that's pretty awesome. And they have awesome popcorn flavors, so we go there a lot, so we're kind of really missing it. I guess they were doing takeout for a bit only from the kitchens, but that wasn't working well for them, and they couldn't get in any of the major delivery services. So they ended up closing completely. And I just hope a lot of those companies that are some of the more indie chains or independently owned, just like whether there's one or two of them, are going to hang in there through this. Hopefully not too much longer. But yeah, I think I'm going to stop messing with this guy. I think overall he is done. So I'm going to go have a snack and relax and maybe play a video game or something. Because I know I can tell, like, I'm in one of those things where I need to do more work, but if I do more work, I'm going to just run myself into the ground and not be able to work tomorrow. So I'm going to have a relaxing evening since we're already at almost 7 here. And hope you guys will all be good. I think there's not really anybody DJing locally tonight, but I think Mojito's DJing tomorrow night, so I'm looking forward to that. And then Saturday night, I'm looking forward to Plastic Disease and Club Sanctuary online. That really helps me unwind. So hopefully I'll see you guys around in a future stream, and have a good night.